There was a time where Baxcalibur, combined with the likes of Chien-Pao, struck fear in the hearts of every Pokemon TCG player. But the deck soon began to falter when folks realized they could just boss up and kill any of the Baxcalibur line to essentially put a game-ending halt to the watery deck. So when I spun Baxcalibur on the wheel, I knew I had to get a little creative. Find a deck that wouldn't instantly die upon losing Baxcalibur, but could still greatly benefit from the free water energy attach. Find a deck that wouldn't instantly die upon losing Baxcalibur, but could still greatly benefit from the free water energy attach. Wait, didn't I just say that? Jynx, get ready for a wild one on today's 825 deck challenge. King of the Snowy Mountain, let's talk about Baxcalibur. Emphasis on the burr. Most are familiar with Baxcalibur, but to those who aren't, Baxcalibur is most used for its ability Super Cold, which allows you to attach a basic water energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon as often as you'd like during your turn. And so it obviously synergizes with water Pokemon who benefit from doing more damage the more water energy is attached to it. Think like your Chien-Paos or your Journey Together Wailords, but in both of those decks, taking out Baxcalibur or getting all of your energy lost in discard pretty much ends things. I looked at two main attackers who I felt wouldn't sync without Baxcalibur, but who both had 3 energy attacks that would definitely benefit from Baxcalibur's presence. The first of which was Wellspring Ogerpon. Its Sob attack is a perfect 20 damage retreat lock for 1 of any energy, while its Torrential Pump does 100 damage to the active Pokemon, and then allows you to discard all attached energy in exchange for an additional 120 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon, creating lots of creative use opportunities. Y'all have probably seen Wellspring and Baxcalibur before, so let's get to the real oddball here, Jynx. Jynx EX from 151 has 2 attacks that hypothetically synergize well with each other. Heartstop and Kiss for 1 water and 2 colorless energy KOs your opponent's active Pokemon if it's asleep, and its second attack, Icy Wind, does 120 damage and puts your opponent's active Pokemon to sleep. Sleep is a bit of a coin flip of a condition, as after you've put your opponent's Pokemon to sleep, they then flip a coin during Pokemon checkup, and if it lands on heads, they wake up. My goal was actually to not utilize Jynx's attack that puts Pokemon to sleep, as I had another plan up my sleeves. A secret weapon, Shiinotic from Surging Sparks. Shiinotic has an ability where if it's inactive, it can put your opponent's Pokemon to sleep. So my goal today would be to get Shiinotic into active, sleep my opponent's Pokemon, retreat into charged up Jynx, and instantly KO. And while it may take a hot minute to get those pieces into play, that was okay because Wellspring would ideally be stalling early game and maybe taking some prizes with Torrential and Sob. The only other Pokemon I was running was Fezandipiti for some card draw. Otherwise, this was the Baxcalibur crew. On the trainer side of the house, I was relying on Arven, which I was running 4 of, to get some key items and tools out. For items, I had Earthen Vessel and Energy Retrievals to get energy into my hand for Baxcalibur's ability. Then I had Nest Balls, Buddy-Buddy Poffins, and Ultra Balls to get Pokemon out. For tools, I was running both Bravery Charm and Hero's Cape as my A-Spec to add HP to my low HP Jynx and Wellspring Ogerpons. Air Balloon was a vital tool to get Shiinotic out of active after sleeping my opponents. Then my stadium of choice was also to help beef up Wellspring Ogerpon and Jynx, Lively Stadium, which adds 30 HP to all basic Pokemon in play. With only 7 water energy in tow, but plenty of ways to get energy back into my hand or back from discard, I was ready to roll. It was time to playtest this deck and see if my vision could come to fruition, and starting the Jynx in active was not ideal, as Jynx was a main attacker, but I'd much prefer it come out after I've had a little bit more time to set up. I also made an immediate mistake when I placed a Bravery Charm onto the Jynx. Sure, it increased its low 200 HP to 250, but this meant Air Balloon wouldn't be able to be attached to pull it back, so Jynx was pretty much stuck unless I wanted to toss away 2 energy to retreat it. I did end up getting a Frigibax and Morelull out to hopefully utilize the Rare Candy into Baxcalibur, but my opponent called me out, or rather bossed me out, because up went Frigibax before it could even evolve, and they were on the board and I was on the panic train, because I was truly dead drawing. With no energy, I did what I could, but my opponent just kept building up higher and higher, to the point where I knew there was no chance I was overcoming this. I kicked and screamed, getting the Pokemon pieces into play in the end, with Jynx, Shiinotic with the Air Balloon, and Baxcalibur all up. But I had no energy, and well, no energy means no damage means no KOs, and no KOs means no victory. I returned to the deck to make minor changes in between, this time cutting a penny that I had included in my original build for 1 more water energy, bringing the deck to 8. I then dove into match 2. Match 2 started very similarly to match 1, starting off with a Jynx as my only basic again. Jynx! And then I got out Frigibax and Morelull just like the last game. Jynx again. Oh, and another similarity. Morelull, this time instead of Frigibax, was bossed up and taken out. Third Jynx. Is it still a Jynx if it's 3? That I'm not sure about. But then the similarities ended. I used an Arven for a Nest Ball, and then used that Nest Ball for Fezandipiti. If my Pokemon were going to get taken out, I'd want to be getting some card draw from it. Further, I'd been putting water energy onto my Jynx, and this game I actually had access to energy to get Jynx attacking pretty soon. So I was able to swing at my opponent's Reshiram EX using Icy Wind for weakness, and do just 20 damage shy of a knockout, thanks to my in-play Lively Stadium. I also had put Reshiram to sleep, but the coin flips were not on my side and he instantly woke up. This was alright, as Reshiram was only swinging for a max 130 at the moment, meaning my Jynx could take a hit. With them putting down a Charmander on their turn, I wasn't super interested in trying to deal with a Charizard, so I counter-captured it up and hit. I took a moment with this turn though, as I was trying to see if, with the cards in my hand, there was a way for me to use my benched Wellspring Ogerpon's Torrential Pump to just close out the game here. But I was 1 energy in my hand shy of being able to make that move happen, so I stuck with a knockout on Charmander and let Reshiram come right back up. Now I had failed to do the math because I completely forgot that by me taking out a prize card, Reshiram would now be hitting harder, in fact hard enough to knock out my Jynx, forcing me to put my Wellspring Ogerpon up. With the Fezandipiti and Baxcalibur, I had the ability and option here to return knockout Reshiram using either the 20 HP Sob Attack or Torrential Pump. But unable to close out the game here thanks to the benching of a Mew EX, I decided I'd boss up the Mew EX and sob at it to whittle down its health, eventually aiming to close out in a Torrential Pump. Then one of my favorite moves of the game happened when my opponent replaced my Lively Stadium, which as a reminder gives all basic Pokemon plus 30 HP, with a Grand Tree, knocking out their own Reshiram EX. Seeing their intended play with the benched Pidgey, I opted to do the Torrential Pump to prevent Pidgeot from happening, and just battered Mew until the win was mine. So this match went significantly better than the first, and all of my pieces felt like they came together better, and the 3-card drop from Fezandipiti completely enabled the deck. I never ended up getting the Shiinotic set up until the end, but I didn't really need it, as Wellspring and Jynx worked on their own with Baxcalibur to keep them energized pretty well. Seeing how much better the deck operated with card draw, I removed an Arctibax so that there was only one with 2 rare candies to add a Cleffa into the mix as an early game draw engine to help set up. My next matchup was against a Gardevoir deck, and check out this hand I was able to get going by turn 3. And then, an Iono washed it all away. Through a counter catcher and an Iono of my own, I was able to get Wellspring Ogerpon able to Torrential Pump on both the active Ralt and Munkidori, preventing Gardevoir from coming online a bit longer. But Lily's Clefairy EX was actually a pretty big problem for me, as it was providing consistent damage for only 2 energy, eventually taking out my Wellspring Ogerpon, and I had a Shiinotic up and Jynx on the bench, and frustratingly the necessary energy in hand for the sleep knockout play, but couldn't find my Baxcaliburs for the energy attach. Because of this, I ended up just having to rely on a sleep and retreat play with Shiinotic, but of course Lily's Clefairy is not interested in staying asleep and woke up instantly every time. I seriously prolonged as long as I could, but without getting the Baxcaliburs up, which drove me wild because of the hand I had earlier in the matchup, I just couldn't get momentum going, leading to the eventual loss. Now I felt like the deck was in a relatively strong spot. In 3 games I hadn't been able to pull off the sleep and knockout move I was hyped for, but even without that, it was doing pretty well. It just had a number of pieces that needed to be in place to make it even more consistent, which I realized was a similar problem to the Chien-Pao decks of yesteryear. Without Baxcalibur, things could easily fall apart. So I don't think I realized, but I've been on a pretty good meta champion streak, with the past 3 decks, including last week's horrible deck, all being meta champions, and I wanted Baxcalibur to keep this streak alive. If the deck ended up losing, that means though, the deck would become a Veluza loser, and I was not interested in that. And the matchup started very strong, with a 3-card mulligan on my opponent's side and me going second with Cleffa inactive. From the mulligans, I knew I was up against an EV Box variant, but from what I saw, it looked like I'd be primarily running into Jolteon, which is something my Pokemon are weak to. Eek. After they took their first turn, I went and I would be aiming to use as many cards as possible to make sure Cleffa's Grasping Draw had maximum potential. I got out a Jynx, I got out a Morelull, and in hand I had a Baxcalibur, Rare Candy, and Shiinotic, and Iono. So long as I didn't get Iono next turn by my opponent, I felt like I was in a very, very good spot. And then my opponent went for the move that occurred in 2 of my test matches, an early boss's order onto Morelull of all Pokemon. Morelull was then knocked out, and with me needing a tiny bit more time before I could get Wellspring attacking, I evolved up my Frigibax Baxcalibur using the Rare Candy, then I counter-captured up Noctowl to potentially force them to waste an energy on a Noctowl retreat, and Grasping Drew. My opponent was able to get Fan Rotom up next turn in place of the Noctowl, and with a swing of 70, took out my beautiful baby Cleffa. I had a lot of what I needed though for some serious knockout potential to return, and so I put Wellspring Ogerpon up and managed to attach the necessary energy to Torrential Pump, knock out the Fan Rotom and the Hoot on the bench, putting us both at 4 prizes. I was very hopeful that Jolteon EX wouldn't be able to get the energy attached to do its 280 attack and take out my Wellspring Ogerpon on the next turn. Unfortunately, it absolutely got the necessary energy and did take out my Wellspring Ogerpon. But all was not lost here. If I could get Jolteon taken out on this turn, my opponent would be in a very bad spot. And withdrawing into Earthen Vessel, the only component I was missing for the Jynx Shiinotic sleep combo was the Shiinotic to force the sleep. This was going to be a huge flip the script from Fezandipiti. I needed to get one of the 2 Shiinotics, one of 2 Ultra Balls, or one of my 3 remaining Arvens. And to my disappointment, I did not get any of those things. This meant things were grim. I could still attack using Jynx's 120 damage Icy Wind attack, which puts Jolteon to sleep, and maybe, just maybe, the coin flip would be in my favor to keep Jolteon asleep. Further, because it had just used its 280 damage attack last turn, the text on Jolteon reads that Jolteon can't attack on the next turn. So I went ahead with Icy Wind, and of course with my luck, the sleep did not stick. But now the real question, could my opponent find a way to get Jolteon in and out of active to be able to attack again and win the game? And immediately down came the switch, and with Fezandipiti having an energy attached for the retreat, the match was now locked up, and unfortunately for Baxcalibur, he became a Veluza loser. My disappointment was immeasurable. I was so close to getting this deck across the finish line. It felt like I had the win in my grasps. If I could change anything in this deck, I have one thing in mind, but I'll get there in a moment. For the ratings, I'm giving this deck a fun rating of 7.5 out of 10. I believe so much in the power of Jynx EX paired up with Shiinotic. It's a fun set of tools that work together perfectly. I'm just sad that today's showcase didn't really show off the full potential. For flow factor, I'd give this deck a 6 out of 10. I think for a deck that has a decent amount going on, I figured out with the prioritization of Fez and the include of Cleffa how to really make this deck work. I'm curious with different draw engines how the deck would do, but it does have a lot of thinning potential built in. For win equity, I'm going to say it's a 4 out of 10. It won 1 out of the 4 matches today and is a Veluza loser. For a final score, the deck gets a harsh 5.8 out of 10. This deck deserves so much better, but I have to be real about it at the same time. If I were to revise it, I'd cut down on one of the Baxcalibur and Frigibaxes to do a 2-1-2 line with 2 rare candies. Then I would include perhaps an additional Iono, or maybe 2 of the new Lily's Determinations, just to add a little bit more hand drop potential. Hey everyone, there's someone I really want you to meet. It's this wheel. And this wheel is about to tell you who I'm going to be meeting in next week's episode. Simisear. I've looked briefly at Simisear before, and I know the elemental monkeys have some sort of synergy to them, but is the synergy actually viable? I'll have to see next week on the 825 Deck Challenge.